I think we're good. So thanks everybody for coming. As you heard, I'm going to go over some of the history that built towards where we find ourselves in the situation now. It's a lot of information. So I created a little timeline as well here that I'm going to move through. And of course, we start with the Fourth Amendment, the United States Constitution, and you'll hear a lot about this. This is the original, actual Fourth Amendment here, so you don't have to take my word for it. It says, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause. Now, of course, fast forward to the World War I period when the Espionage Act was created. And the thing to understand about the Espionage Act, that it was conceived and originally implemented as a wartime measure. So the focus of it was intended to be targeting people that actually interfere with military operations or work for an opposing side in a war. But of course, it's been expanded and changed numerous times over the years. This Sedition Act in 1918 was actually a set of amendments to the Espionage Act, and people may have heard about the Red Scare and the Palmer Raids. That's the body of rules that those things happened under. But again, the key is that this was focused on national defense in wartime. The picture is actually a IWW office after a Palmer raid in 1919. Fast forward World War II, and we come to the age of encryption. And this is a photo of an Enigma machine, courtesy of the NSA, where during the war, the Allied ability to decode and decrypt codes was important in the outcome of the war. So that began an era after the war where the US government founded the NSA. It's an agency within the Department of Defense. So again, it is intended to be military and outwardly focused. It basically has two main purposes, two main programs. One called SIGINT, as in Signals Intelligence, which is gathering information, spying, and sharing that information with various arms of the United States government. It has another role called Information Assurance, which is intended as protective, to protect information and data that belongs to the United States. I thought that their mission statement, their stated mission statement, is actually pretty relevant to this concept. It is global cryptologic dominance through responsive presence and network advantage. So keep that in mind as we think about some of these, we learn more about these programs. Come on. Yeah, okay. So in the 70s, after Watergate, there was one of the first major charges under the Espionage that people have probably heard a lot about is Daniel Ellsberg and Anthony Russo, who were charged for leaking the Pentagon Papers. They were tried, but it was declared a mistrial, so they were both released without doing any jail time. This is a picture of them at the courthouse in '73. Another program that most of us in activist circles have heard about is Cointelpro, and I thought it would be relevant for people to understand that the way that we first started to learn about Cointelpro was an activist group, Citizens Committee to Investigate the FBI, that removed secret files from an FBI office and released them to the media. So there was a lot more documentation. This triggered a whole process. There were court cases and FOIA requests, and a lot came out about the program. But I thought it was worth understanding that it was leaked secret documents that led us to learn about this program that was responsible for years of surveillance and harassment and discrediting and extreme violence against organized communities, particularly people organizing in communities of color, like CISPES, American Indian Movement, the Black Panther Party, and Puerto Rican Independence Movement, and people organizing in support of Palestine. So in 1972, there was a major Supreme Court decision in U.S. v. U.S. District Court, where that created, after all of these revelations about the extent of government surveillance and harassment without any kind of court supervision, it created a rule that even where the government alleges a national security aspect, warrants are required for domestic electronic surveillance. There's a good quote from that decision that I wanted to read to you. It says, "The price of lawful public dissent must not be a dread of subjection to an unchecked surveillance power, nor must the fear of unauthorized official eavesdropping deter vigorous citizen dissent and discussion of government action in private conversation. For private dissent, no less than open public discourse, is essential to a free society." And then one of the other major outcomes of these revelations about the scale of government abuse and unwarranted surveillance was a church committee, which was a Senate committee that was formed to study these and make some recommendations post-Watergate. And the findings of the committee were that the NSA and the CIA and other intelligence agencies had been engaging in massive domestic spying. And again, the targets were political activists and other politicians from opposing parties. This is an image of the CIA director at the time, Colby, testifying before the church committee. Frank Church had a good statement. He said, "No American would have any privacy left. Such is the capability to monitor everything. Telephone conversations, telegrams, it doesn't matter. There would be no place to hide." But in the true tradition of government, the recommendations, what grew directly out of church committee recommendations was this concept of creating a legislative and court system to oversee surveillance and investigations that do relate to, allegedly, to national security. So in '78, they created the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, Fisa. And its purpose was to provide oversight to foreign intelligence investigations. It was not intended to apply to domestic surveillance, which was already covered by existing court system and law. Thanks. So the FISA court that you've heard about is the court that was created by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And it started functioning in 1979. It has jurisdiction to hear applications for electronic surveillance and physical searches for the purpose of obtaining foreign intelligence information on foreign nationals. It's important to understand this court. It's secret. Meaning the hearings are closed. The decisions are not made public. The people that are targeted by FISA surveillance warrants are not necessarily informed. They're not informed in advance. And it's non-adversarial, so it's not a court where there's two sides that can debate and argue about whether or not something should be allowed or if it's an overreach. And to be a target of a FISA warrant, you do not need to be suspected of any criminal activity. To illustrate, I don't know if you can see this chart very well, from EPIC. EPIC is a great resource on this. If people want to check it out, epic.org. They documented that in the court's lifetime, between 1979 and 2012, there were nearly 34,000 applications, and they rejected only 11 of them. So that gives you a sense of how it really is a rubber stamping process and a kangaroo court. Some of the orders from this court are among the documents that Snowden revealed, so you'll see this when you're looking at these documents, these FISA court documents. Now, in the 1980s, began something called national security letters, which is something else people may have heard of. These, ironically and Orwellian-like, of course, were triggered and began as amendments to privacy legislation that created an exception that allowed the FBI to access personal data in national security-related investigations. So they're demands that go from the FBI, they don't have to come from a judge, and they get issued directly to telephone companies, banks, internet providers, the credit agencies, and they're not optional. They have power like subpoena does. If you don't comply with one, you can get in a lot of legal trouble, but they're not subpoenas because they're not supervised by a judge. Again, you don't need to be suspected of a crime to be the target of a national security letter. Only the FBI needs to decide that you may have information that it would consider relevant to a national security investigation. And not only do you not need to be notified that you're the subject of one, but they usually come with gag orders, making it illegal for the person or the institution or the business that received them to acknowledge their existence at all, or to tell anybody about it, that it's happening. So again, we really don't have a lot of information about to what extent these are used, or how widespread it is, or what happens with the information, because of the secrecy. And they're not court supervised. And again, the standards required for national security letters have also been expanded numerous times, importantly with the Patriot Act. We recently have statistics that say between 2003 and 2006, 192,000 of these letters have been issued in the United States. That's a lot. In 1994, there was a legislation called the Communications Assistance for Law Enforcement Act, CALEA. It mandates that telecoms in the United States, the big companies, are only allowed to install equipment that has a backdoor for the FBI. So when the telecom receives a warrant, then the FBI is able to tap directly into the telephone communication and listen to it in real time. And then 9/11 happened. And within weeks of that, the Patriot Act was passed, and this, of course, was incredibly wide-reaching legislation that it was incredibly difficult to understand all the implications of it at the time. There's no way that it was fully understood even when it was passed. But it, among many things, it has important expansions to surveillance authority, including one section 215 that allows the FBI to get secret court orders for business records. We've heard about this a lot in the Snowden documents, these business records, and any other tangible thing, so long as they can claim that it's to protect against international terror or clandestine intelligence activities, and who knows what that means? I'm not really sure. Section 505 reduced the threshold required for national security letters, like I mentioned. And Section 213 allows for sneak and peek warrants, which means that law enforcement can go into your house without advance notification. Now, another thing that happened shortly after that is there was another major whistleblower, NSA whistleblower. His name's William Binney, and I wanted to play a little. Let me see if I can make this happen.
I was breaking different codes and data systems and doing data analysis against the Soviet Union. After 9/11, they took one of the programs I had done, or the back-end part of it, and started to use it to spy on everybody in this country. So that was a program they created called Stellar Wind. That was separate and compartmented from the regular activity that was ongoing, because it was doing domestic spying. All the equipment was coming in, I knew something was happening, but then when the contractors I had hired came and told me what they were doing, it was clear where all the hardware was going and what they were using it to do.
So Binney was important in another whistleblower. He's still been very, very active and talking about helping to analyze some of the Snowden documents as well. And he helped reveal the Stellar Wind program, which I heard him mention. He was targeted by FBI investigations, including some raids on his home, but he was not ever convicted of anything, and he continues to be a critic. The clip, by the way, is from a film called The Project, released a year ago by Laura Poitras, whose name, of course, you've heard recently too. She was one of the journalists that Snowden reached out to. It's available online. I'd recommend it. It's really great. Also in 2002, we learned of a program called TIA, Total Information Awareness, another DoD program for data mining and profiling technologies, trying to gather as much information about everybody in the United States as possible. It created a huge outcry and was canned by Congress in 2003. But of course, as we've learned now, most of its capabilities and beyond some have been resurrected and expanded through other programs. Creepy logo and all. It actually says, "Scientia est potentia," which I understand means knowledge is power. In 2002, there was an important rule change at Fisa. As I'd explained before, the court was intended to be not a substitute for the regular criminal justice system in the United States. But in 2002, the court issued a ruling at the request of DOJ that the wall they'd built between regular criminal prosecutions in the United States and FISA warrants was coming down. So after that time, they were able to use evidence gathered through FISA as evidence in court in regular criminal prosecutions in the United States. And this really is the point where it became the very thing that it was created in order to prevent, which was unchecked, secret, out-of-control government surveillance on American citizens. 2005, you might remember George Bush refusing to be ashamed, acknowledging that he had renewed secret NSA unwarranted surveillance program 30 times. We also, in 2007, we learned about some other DCSNet, another system, very high-tech and deep surveillance used in the US as a result of an EFF lawsuit. But what we didn't know is that in 2007, PRISM began collecting data from these internet providers. This document is one of the Snowden releases on the left there. You can see it's all the agencies that the PRISM program collects information from, and on the right are the types of information that it collects. And in 2008, there was a very important amendment to FISA called the FAA, the FISA Amendment Act, that is what you'll hear references to now when they talk, a lot of the NSA and politicians that speak, they say it's authorized by this act. It changed it broadened the requirement of there being a foreign person involved and said that it's okay as long as it wasn't intended to target a US person, that it's allowed. A major court case in 2009 giving retroactive immunity to telecommunications companies for George Bush's illegal surveillance program. And in 2011, the NSA began construction on the massive data center in Utah that you may have heard about as well. And again, one of the things that's important to understand is that while it's an NSA center, it's run by the NSA, its purpose is to provide intelligence for the intelligence community, which is actually 17 different federal agencies and their intelligence arms. We renewed the Patriot Act in 2011. And we reauthorized FISA in 2012 without the expanded privacy protections that people had been looking for. Now, just recently, in 2013, there was a Supreme Court decision in Clapper v. Amnesty International that ruled that because these programs are secret, a lot of groups had come and said, you know, we're the people that are being targeted by this, and we want to be able to have some court review of the process and see what's happening. The court said, because you don't have any proof that this is happening to you, then you can't access the courts to review it. And so they dismissed it. But of course, nobody has any proof because it's secret. So this is an important ruling. It happened just earlier this year. So one of the things that's worth noting is that since the Snowden revelations, there has been a new round of court cases filed, because there's, for example, the Verizon warrant is available to look at now. So the ACLU has gone back and said, well, we're Verizon customers, so now can we have standing? So it'll be important to watch where these go. And here we are in 2013. The first document that he leaked, as I mentioned, was a Fisa order. And he has been charged now under the Espionage Act. And of course, yesterday, Bradley Manning was sentenced to 35 years, I think it was. One of his statements I thought was relevant to us: sometimes you have to pay a heavy price to live in a free society. And here we are. So quickly, what we've learned is that the US surveillance network is vast, and it's not new, and that all of these multiple programs really need to be understood together. It's a system, like as a giant network, that operates in total secrecy and with total impunity. And that this network has been repeatedly, over time, approved and expanded by every branch of government, by the courts, by Congress, and by all of these executive agencies, of which the NSA is one. And the goal is to, and function, is to provide the US with global information dominance. And that FISA court is a kangaroo court that does not function as a check or balance on this system at all. And that whistleblowers are being targeted with unprecedented ferocity. And we have so much to lose. Thank you.